We're looking for Elijah Baptiste. We have reason to believe he's working in this hospital.
I don't care what you believe. You're not going anywhere near my staff without proper authorization.
We're federal agents. We don't need your permission.
Actually, you do. This is a hospital. We have patient privacy laws, employee protections, and protocols you're required.
At 2:45 p.m. on a quiet Thursday, the fourth-floor ICU of Street Anselm Regional Hospital stopped breathing. Not because a patient flatlined, but because 3 armed federal agents walked in, eyes locked on a black nurse who was saving lives, fully believing they had the right to take him away without proof, without care, and without a warrant. Before I continue, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if this kind of real, powerful story matters to you, please subscribe. I promise you'll want to see how this unfolds. The nurse they were looking for was named Elijah Baptiste. He was 34 years old, calm under pressure, and one of the most trusted ICU nurses in the hospital. Doctors asked for him by name. New nurses learned by watching him. Families remembered him because he explained things clearly and never talked down to them. Elijah worked 12-hour shifts surrounded by machines that beeped non-stop, caring for people who were one breath away from death. Elijah was born in Haiti. He came to the United States when he was 2 years old. He grew up in New York, went to public school, worked his way through nursing school, and became a U.S. citizen as a teenager. He had a passport. He voted. He paid taxes. His papers were real, verified, and filed properly years ago. None of that mattered at 2:45 p.m. That afternoon, Elijah was assigned to 2 ICU patients. One was an older man recovering from heart surgery. The other was a woman fighting a severe infection that had already shut down parts of her body. Elijah moved carefully between beds, checking medications, adjusting machines, and speaking softly to patients even when they were unconscious. He believed people could still hear. That belief was interrupted when nurse supervisor Helen Moore appeared at the doorway of the patient's room. Her face was tight. Her voice was low. She told Elijah there were federal immigration agents outside asking for him by name. Elijah froze. Not because he had done anything wrong, but because he knew how quickly things could turn when uniforms decided you didn't belong. He asked why they were there. Helen said she didn't know. She told him to keep working and not react. She told him she had it handled. Outside the room, 3 ICE agents stood near the nurse's station. They wore tactical vests. They were loud. They were impatient. One of them kept pointing down the hallway toward the patient rooms. Helen stood in front of them. So did Dr. Naomi Park, the attending physician overseeing the ICU that day. Dr. Park had trained for years to work in critical care. She knew chaos had no place in an ICU. The agents demanded access. Helen refused. They said they were federal and didn't need permission. Helen told them this was a hospital, not a street corner. Their voices rose. Other nurses looked up from charts and monitors. One by one, they stepped closer. Not to fight. Not to shout. Just to stand there. Elijah watched from behind glass. His chest felt tight. He checked his patient again, even though nothing had changed. His hands were steady, but his thoughts weren't. He wondered who gave his name. He wondered how often this happened to other people who didn't have coworkers willing to step in. When Elijah finally stepped out of the room, one agent pointed at him like he had been found guilty already. That was when Helen moved directly in front of Elijah. The agent said they had a warrant. Dr. Park asked to see it. What they showed was not signed by a judge. It was not permission to arrest. It was a piece of paper that only allowed questions in limited situations. The agents did not care. They tried to step around Helen. They tried to move closer. Elijah stepped back. His heart raced. Without planning it, the nurses moved. 8 of them. They stood shoulder to shoulder in the hallway. Scrubs touching. Arms close. A quiet wall of human beings who refused to move. No one yelled. No one touched anyone. The security cameras recorded everything. One agent raised his voice and accused them of interference. Helen said they were protecting patients and staff. Elijah stood behind them, feeling something he had never felt at work before. Fear, yes, but also something else. Safety. Hospital security arrived. Then hospital administration. Then legal counsel. The agents waited, angry and stuck, unable to move forward without forcing their way through medical staff in front of cameras and witnesses. Minutes passed, then more minutes. The agents finally backed off, but not before one of them looked directly at Elijah and told him this wasn't over. The elevators closed. The ICU breathed again. Elijah leaned against the wall, shaking. His coworkers surrounded him. They did not ask questions. They did not blame him. They told him they had his back. What no one knew yet was that this moment, this quiet act of unity, would soon explode across the country, expose a brutal system failure, and end with a $14 million judgment that forced the federal government to answer for what they tried to do inside a hospital meant to save lives. And this was only the beginning. The IT returned to its routine within minutes, but Elijah did not. His body stayed tense as alarms beeped and carts rolled by. Every sound felt sharper. Every uniform in the hallway pulled his attention. He finished his shift because patients needed him, but his focus cracked in places he could not control. When the clock finally released him, he sat in his car and stared at the steering wheel, breathing hard, replaying the agents' faces again and again. That evening, the hospital arranged a meeting with an immigration attorney named Rosa Alvarez. She spoke calmly and clearly. She asked Elijah for documents. He told her where his passport was. He told her about his citizenship. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said the problem was not his status. The problem was a system that moved first and checked later. 2 days passed. The hospital confirmed what Elijah already knew. His employment file was clean. His records were verified. Nothing was missing. Still, the agents had tried to take him. That question sat heavy in everyone's chest. Why him? Why now? The answer arrived in a short email sent to the hospital's legal team. An anonymous tip had claimed a man with Elijah's name was undocumented. The database pulled a match from 15 years earlier. Same name, different person, different life. No date of birth matched. No number matched. No photo matched, but no one checked. They came anyway. Elijah learned this while sitting in a small office with white walls and a flickering light. His hands clenched when Rosa explained it. A name alone had been enough. No apology followed. No correction call came from ICE. Just silence. Sleep became difficult. Elijah woke at night thinking he heard boots. He checked the door twice before leaving home. At work, he flinched when security walked by. His patients noticed. One asked if he was okay. Elijah said yes because that was easier. A week later, ICE returned. Not to the ICU. To Elijah's apartment building. A neighbor called him in panic. Elijah stayed inside while Rosa spoke to the agents by phone. They had no warrant. They left angry. That was when Elijah decided to fight back. The lawsuit was filed quietly at first. Federal court. Clear claims. Illegal attempt to detain. Racial targeting. Emotional harm. Workplace disruption. The hospital provided footage. Nurses gave statements. Doctors signed affidavits. The wall of support did not shrink. When the case became public, the tone changed. News cameras waited outside the hospital. Social media filled with the video of nurses standing still, refusing to move. People shared it with one sentence again and again. They stood together. ICE responded with a statement that avoided responsibility. They claimed good faith. They said mistakes happen. Elijah read it and felt his stomach turn. Good faith did not knock on hospital doors. Good faith did not point at a man and say his name like a threat. During a deposition, Elijah finally spoke directly to one of the agents. The room was silent except for the recorder. The agent said they only wanted to ask questions. Elijah asked why questions required force and fear. The agent said procedures were followed. Elijah asked which procedure allowed them to ignore proof and common sense. The agent did not answer. That exchange stayed short. It did not need to be long. The truth was already heavy in the room. Expert witnesses explained how name-only matches fail. Doctors explained how enforcement in hospitals scares patients away. Nurses explained how close Elijah came to being pulled from critical care. Each voice added weight. The case grew. ICE emails were uncovered. Instructions said verify and detain. No checklist. No review. Just speed. The judge did not hide her concern. She asked why no one paused. No one answered that either. Elijah began therapy. He did not hide that fact. He spoke about panic and anger and the shame of being treated like a problem in a place where he saved lives. His therapist documented the impact. The court listened. As the trial date approached, ICE offered a settlement. It was low. It came with silence attached. Elijah refused. He wanted accountability. He wanted change. The trial opened with a video. Nurses moving together. A quiet wall. The jury watched closely. Faces tightened. No one looked away. Elijah took the stand on the third day. He spoke slowly. He spoke plainly. He said he loved his job. He said he believed in rules. He said rules should protect people, not hunt them. When cross-examined, an ICE lawyer asked if Elijah felt targeted because of his race. Elijah did not hesitate. He said yes. He said he was the only black male nurse on that shift. He said the agents did not ask for anyone else. The courtroom stayed still. By the final week, the defense had little left. Good faith sounded thin. Mistakes sounded careless. The jury received the case with clear instructions. They deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the foreperson stood and read the numbers. Liability on every count. Damages totaling $14 million. Punitive included. Elijah closed his eyes. Not from relief, from release. Outside, nurses hugged him again. Cameras flashed. Helen stood nearby, proud and tired. This time, the system had been forced to stop and look, and it would not forget his name again. In the months that followed, hospitals across the country reviewed their policies. Staff trainings increased. Security protocols changed. Signs went up reminding everyone that patient care came first. Elijah returned to full shifts slowly, supported by coworkers who checked on him without being asked. He learned that courage could be quiet and still spread far. The case became a reference point in meetings and classrooms, a reminder that harm often begins with shortcuts, and justice begins when people refuse to step aside. Elijah kept working, choosing purpose over fear, one shift at a time. The courtroom was colder than Elijah expected, not in temperature but in tone. Every sound echoed. Shoes on tile. Papers sliding. Breath held too long. This was not a place for comfort. This was a place where stories were taken apart piece by piece and tested for truth. Elijah sat at the table beside his lawyers, hands folded, eyes forward, knowing that everything he had lived through was about to be questioned by people who had never stood in his shoes. The jury was seated early. 12 strangers who did not know him, did not know the ICU, did not know what it felt like to be pointed at in your workplace by armed men. They would decide if what happened to him mattered. The government went first. Their lawyers spoke smoothly. He said the agents were doing their jobs. He said mistakes happen. He said no one was actually arrested, so no real harm was done. Elijah listened and felt his jaw tighten. He wondered how close someone had to come to losing their freedom before it counted. Then the video played. The screen showed the ICU hallway. It showed the agents arriving. It showed their body language change when they saw Elijah. It showed nurses stepping forward. Not running. Not yelling. Just standing. The room stayed silent as the footage played in full. When it ended, several jurors avoided looking at the defense table. Witnesses followed. A hospital administrator explained protocols. A security officer explained private property rules. A nursing expert explained what happens when care is interrupted even for minutes. Each one spoke plainly. No drama, just facts. Then Elijah was called. He walked to the stand slowly. He swore to tell the truth. He sat upright and looked at the jury. He did not try to impress them. He just spoke. He talked about his job. He talked about the patients he was caring for that day. He talked about hearing his name spoken like an accusation. He talked about fear without exaggerating it. He said fear did not make him weak, it made him human. The government lawyer began his questions carefully. He asked about Elijah's background, his education, his citizenship. Elijah answered clearly. Then the tone shifted. The lawyer asked if Elijah understood that ICE agents had authority. Elijah said authority still had limits. The lawyer asked if Elijah refused to cooperate. Elijah said he followed legal advice. The lawyer asked if Elijah felt threatened. That was when Elijah looked directly at him and answered without hesitation. Yes, he said. I was threatened the moment they tried to take me without knowing who I was. The lawyer pressed. He suggested Elijah could have cleared things up by answering questions. Elijah shook his head. That's not how rights work, he said. You don't give them up because someone with a badge asks. The lawyer paused, then asked the question he thought would change everything. He asked Elijah if he believed race played a role. Elijah took a breath. I was the only black man on that floor, he said. They didn't ask for anyone else. They didn't double-check. They didn't slow down. They came for me by name and nothing more. You can call that coincidence if you want. I can't. The courtroom was silent. Later that day, one of the agents testified. He wore a suit now. He looked smaller without the vest. He said he acted on information provided. He said he followed procedure. Elijah's lawyer asked one question. Did you verify his date of birth before attempting to detain him? The agent said no. Did you verify his social security number? No. Did you confirm he was the same person listed in the database? No. The lawyer let the silence sit. Then the judge allowed Elijah one final exchange. He turned in his seat and faced the agent. His voice stayed steady. You looked at me and saw a problem, Elijah said. You didn't see a nurse. You didn't see a citizen. You saw a name and a face and decided that was enough. Do you understand what that does to someone? The agent shifted. He said he was just doing his job. Elijah nodded once. So was I, he said. I was keeping people alive. You tried to take me away from that without knowing who I was. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. No one interrupted. The judge allowed it. Expert testimony followed. Psychologists spoke about trauma. Economists spoke about career harm. Legal scholars spoke about constitutional limits. The picture became clear. This was not about one error. It was about a pattern that depended on speed over certainty. The defense tried to argue immunity. They tried to say the agents could not be held responsible. The judge rejected that argument. Rights did not disappear because enforcement was inconvenient. Closing arguments came at the end of the fourth week. Elijah's lawyer stood and pointed to the screen behind him. He showed the image of nurses standing together. They stopped something illegal without throwing a punch, he said. They knew it was wrong, and they acted. That is what courage looks like. The government's closing was shorter. Less confident. They asked for understanding. They asked for forgiveness without apology. The jury was sent out. 2 days passed. Elijah went back to work between deliberations. He needed the routine. He needed the purpose. His coworkers checked on him quietly. No speeches, just presence. When the jury returned, the room filled again. The foreperson stood. Liability was read clearly. Count after count. The numbers followed. The total landed heavy. $14 million. Elijah did not smile. He exhaled. The judge thanked the jury. She looked at Elijah and said the law existed to prevent exactly what happened to him. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. Elijah answered only one. He said this was never about money. It was about stopping this from happening to someone else who might not have 8 coworkers willing to stand in front of them. That night, Elijah slept through until morning for the first time in months. But the story was not over yet. The money came last. Long after the verdict, long after the headlines faded, long after Elijah realized he could walk into work without his chest tightening. $14 million looked large on paper, but it was never the part that stayed with him. What stayed with him was the moment the system failed and the moment people refused to let it finish the job. ICE released a short statement weeks later. They said procedures would be reviewed. They said training would be updated. They did not say Elijah's name. They did not apologize. But behind closed doors, change was forced. New rules required multiple points of verification. Hospitals were labeled protected spaces. Supervisors had to approve field actions with full documentation. None of it erased what happened, but it made it harder to repeat. The 3 agents involved were removed from field duty. One resigned. Another was reassigned. Their supervisor lost rank. It was quiet accountability, but it was real. Elijah did not celebrate it. He understood that systems rarely admit wrongdoing loudly. They adjust when pressure becomes too expensive to ignore. Street Anselm Regional Hospital placed a small plaque behind the ICU nurses' station. It did not mention ICE. It did not mention Elijah. It simply read, "We protect our patients. We protect our staff." Every person who worked there knew exactly why it existed. Elijah stayed in the ICU. He was offered administrative roles. He was offered speaking positions. He turned most of them down. He wanted to stay where he was useful, where people needed him, where fear did not win. He did accept one invitation. A national nursing conference asked him to speak. 5,000 nurses sat in a large hall and listened as he told the story without drama. He talked about fear. He talked about paperwork. He talked about standing still when someone tries to move you without reason. When he finished, the room stood. Not to clap loudly, but to acknowledge something deeper. That courage does not always look loud. Sometimes it looks like staying in place. Elijah used part of the settlement to create a legal support fund for healthcare workers. Nurses, techs, janitors, anyone who might be targeted while doing their job. He partnered with advocacy groups to train hospitals on how to respond to enforcement actions. He focused on preparation, not panic. At work, things felt normal again. Mostly. New nurses sometimes asked about the video. Elijah answered when he felt like it. Other times, he redirected the conversation back to patient care. He did not want to be defined by one moment, even if that moment changed everything. One afternoon, months later, a police officer entered the ICU looking for information about a patient. He followed protocol. He spoke calmly. He waited when asked. Still, Elijah felt the old tension rise. He noticed the officer glance at his badge, his name. The officer asked a question that crossed a line. Not illegal, just unnecessary. Elijah met his eyes and answered once, clearly. "You're here for patient care matters," Elijah said. "That's all you need to be here for." The officer paused. Then he nodded and stepped back. That was it. No confrontation. No drama. Just boundaries holding. Elijah realized then that what had changed was not the world. It was him. He trusted his rights now. He trusted his voice. He trusted that standing still could be powerful. The ICU kept moving. Patients came and went. Some lived. Some didn't. Elijah carried each one with the same care he always had. He still talked to them even when they could not answer. He still believed hearing mattered. Years later, the case was taught in law schools, in medical ethics classes, in trainings about racial profiling. It was cited as an example of what happens when enforcement forgets the human cost of shortcuts. Elijah's name appeared in footnotes and slides. He did not attend those classes. He lived the lesson every day. Sometimes, late in a shift, he would look down the hallway where the nurses once stood together. He would remember how ordinary it looked, how quiet, how easy it would have been for them to step aside. They didn't. That choice rippled outward. It protected him. It protected future patients. It reminded institutions that rules matter only when people are willing to enforce them fairly. Elijah never called himself a victim. He called himself a witness, to fear, to courage, to the thin line between order and harm. When asked what he would do if it happened again, his answer stayed simple. He said he would stand where he belonged and trust the people beside him. Because what they tried to take from him was not just his freedom. It was his dignity, his purpose, his place. And that was the one thing they could not take. The IQ lights still hum. The machines still beep. Life and death still trade places quietly every day. And somewhere in that controlled chaos, a nurse named Elijah Baptiste continues to do his job, protected not by silence, but by people who chose to stand. That is how the story ends. Not with anger. Not with fear. But with people refusing to move.